Hello and thank you so much for joining me today. Today I'm sharing with you an altered paintbrush that I created using lots of Finnabair goodies and some of her new molds. For this paintbrush I used two paintbrushes and they are actually layered on top of each other. The first is a 3-inch brush and the second is a 2-inch brush. So ultimately it's not a very big brush, but it is pretty in my opinion. Anyhow, so I did start by a clear coat of gesso on each one of the brushes and all the resin pieces that I'm using. And I started by adhering the brushes together with a little bit of heavy body gel. And then I'm going to add just a touch of wire, just to add a little bit of texture and to secure everything while I am starting my process. With my wire in place, I went right ahead and started applying my resin pieces. I used the bird skull on the top, and then you're going to see me add a miscellaneous frame that I have in my stash. And then I'm going to start building my focal point, which is a mix of the bat wings. I guess they're bat wings. I think they're bat wings. And a skull that I altered just a little bit from the set as well. For the placement of these wings, I do need something underneath to stabilize them, so I just pulled a button out of my stash, and that gave me the surface area that I needed to adhere them to. So with a little bit of heavy body gel, they are in place, and I had them crooked mainly so they would stay level, but also it kind of looked, I liked the way it looked as well. Anyhow, another little frame from my stash and more buttons to build everything up so everything's stable. It's a trick that I use. You know, I don't even know how many buttons I have in this room, and I'll probably never use them all, but I do use them for things like this. One tiny accent star there, and I'm moving on to my skull. So you can see that I cut the bottom of the jaw of the skull off, and now you can see that I've applied a thin layer of glue and I'm adhering my metallic flakes. For this I used the Steampunk set. I like it because it has all the colors in it, and honestly I think this jar will probably last me a very, very, very long time. Because there's just a ton in there and you don't really realize how much is in there because it's so light. Anyhow, so with the glue in place, I'm just moving the flakes around until I'm happy. I didn't want everything everywhere. I wanted it kind of scattered a little bit. And I'm just placing them on the wings now as well. And then I'm going to put some on the brushes. And you don't wind up seeing all the metallic flakes in the end, but it's there. It does give it a little bit more sparkle, and it also adds a little bit of texture without adding too much of anything. Like I said in the beginning, this is a relatively small brush, so I didn't want to go crazy with extra texture and extra things. Sometimes a little bit of simple is good. Anyhow, you can see that I've adhered some more glue, and now I'm placing my flakes. And this probably, definitely, absolutely is not the best way to do this, but it worked for me. And at the end of the day, there's probably 101 different ways to do things, and however it works for you is great. And this worked for me. It wasn't the smoothest process, but for what I needed to get done, it worked. So in my book, that's a win. And I didn't make a mess with these. They are not all over my desk, and most of them are still in the jar, so that is completely a win for me. So I'm finished placing my flakes. If you could consider giving this video a thumbs up and possibly subscribing, that would be greatly appreciated. And there's my plug for the day. Anyhow, now you can see I'm demolding these little bones from the set, and I used Alumilite Tan Resin for this. It was the easiest one I had on hand, and I didn't really want to paint these too much, so it worked color-wise. Applying some texture with some graphite paste because it's what I grabbed. There's really no rhyme or reason. I'm going to be painting over this anyway, so I'm not really worried about the color or the coverage. I'm just randomly adding some more texture around the brush, so when I add my wax later, it has something to accent. So just randomly around here and there, filling in any gaps that I might see later. Now I'm just mixing up a black wash for these bones just to try to grunge them, age them up a little bit. I'm not, like I said, I didn't want to paint them too much because they are itty bitty little things and I didn't want to add too much texture to them. So you'll see me add the wash to it. I'm going to flip them over, make sure I get both sides. I'm going to heat set it just a touch to make sure that it sticks a little bit. And then I'm going to wipe them, the majority of this wash off. And you'll see I'm going to kind of place them off to the side. And I probably should have showed you the way they looked, but you'll see them later when I attach them to the brush. Anyhow, moving on. So now I'm going to paint the majority of this brush with the black gesso. And I am going to avoid the primary places where I placed the flakes. And looking back, there probably was a better way to do this. But again, when I started the project, I wasn't totally sure what I wanted to do. And my mind kind of went in opposite directions. So I probably should have painted everything black and then applied the flakes. But I didn't do that. So here's where we are. Anyhow. So now I'm adding my color, and the whole thing is I wanted to add the color on top of the flakes because I really like the way that it looks. For whatever reason, because the liquid acrylic is so translucent, you can still see a little bit of the flake behind it, and it gives it such amazing shine. I just love the way that it looks. So here you're going to see me continuing to add my color. I'm going to touch on the wings. I'm going to go up and move to the bird skull, and then you'll see me splash some on the paintbrush here and there. Again, not a lot of color. This is a pretty dark project for my normal style, but I like it. Anyhow, so I'm adding the purple to the skull and just painting layer after layer until I'm happy with it. I do go back and add a third layer, I think, when all is said and done. But I'm just coating that on there until I'm happy with it. Now I've moved on to my wax, and I'm adding a mix of wax. I believe I used Old Denim, Peacock, and Electric Violet, topped with Old Silver. But this is dark, and I'm sorry about the lighting situation. I'm not really 100% sure what happened. I think that I had something casting a shadow on my desk. Sorry. Didn't really see it until I was editing the video. But you can see I'm just lightly touching with my brush. I'm not really being heavy-handed with this. I didn't want the wax to overtake it. I wanted this to still be dark and the main bright spots to be the wings and the skull. So I didn't want the wax to take over, and you can get really heavy-handed with wax. So I'm really trying to be careful here, and that's what I'm doing here. And I'm just trying to see, I'm trying to decide if I want to add the purple to the brush here or if I want to leave the skull the only thing purple. Obviously I decided to add a little bit of touches of purple, and that's what I'm doing now. Sorry for the ramble. Anyhow, so I'm going to continue to add wax, and like I said before, if you haven't liked this video, please consider to do so, and also if you would become a subscriber, that would be very, very appreciated. Again, second plug for the day. Yay! Anyhow, Old Silver, just touching lightly on top of everything to bring everything back, make everything pop just a little tiny bit, accenting those frames. And you can see I used very, very little, and my Old Silver is really dry, so it's, you know, it's not like I got a ton on my finger there. Anyhow, so just lightly, a little goes a really, really, really long way. So I'm going to place the skull, give it a look over, make sure that I'm happy with the way everything looks. Once I decide I'm happy with the brush, I'm going to move on to the bones. And like I said, I didn't want to paint these too much. I didn't want to add too much to them because they're just so dainty. They're so tiny. So I'm just adding a tiny bit of wax here, nothing crazy. I'm just using what was left on the paper towel, what was on the brush, and I'm just lightly touching these bones. I'm just adding the smallest bit of color, nothing too extravagant. Once I have the amount of color that I want on there and they're, you know, dialed up a little bit, I guess you can say, I'm going to go ahead and start attaching these to the brush. So some of them I'm going to glue right to the brush using the heavy body gel, and some of them I'm going to tie this, I don't know what this twine is called, embroidery thread maybe. It's just string that I have on hand. So I'm going to just tie these bones on here. I attach them to a tiny button and I stick it up in there. But I didn't do all that on camera because honestly I got really out of focus and it wasn't worth leaving in the video. And you get the general idea because now the bones are attached. Look at that. Movie magic. So now I'm going to add my final touches, which is a little bit of glossy accents and glitter. I did add glitter into the skull eyes with some glossy accents, and I'm adding some black glass glitter and with some glossy accents, and I'm going to do that randomly all over the brush, a little bit in the bristles as well, and in the crow eyes at the top. And that's it. That really wraps up this brush. So like I said before, I greatly appreciate you watching the video. Thank you so much for joining me today. I do hope that you'll consider giving this video a thumbs up and subscribing if you do like the content that I'm putting up. So that's it. Thanks so much. Enjoy the flip through, and I'll see you next time, guys. Thanks. Bye.